So this ordinance is for repealing and replacing Benicia Municipal Codes 9.06, smoking public places, with a comprehensive smoke-free public places and multi-unit housing ordinance. And our choices are to adopt as presented or make changes as proposed, or not have a motion to adopt and it dies. So, Councilmember Young?
Thank you. So as you might imagine, probably guess, I have some concerns about this ordinance and some amendments that I would like to propose. First of all, are there any condo associations in Benicia that are currently smoke-free?
We had considerable,
Condo association.
Ms. McDonald, do you know?
We don't think there is. Okay, I used to live in a condo association, 565 Lorry, that we've received written testimony from the owners there, or residents, in favor of this. And when I lived there, I had a smoker below me, and it was nasty. And I certainly understand the desire for not having to breathe somebody else's smoke. I do think, however, and the lady from Club Pacifica made the point that it would be easier for her to institute a smoke-free complex if there was a city ordinance to back it up. So I'm going to suggest perhaps a compromise, and that is that any complex or condo association that has taken the action to ban smoking, that this ordinance would apply there, and that we would then be a backup for those people. But if they're not willing to make that change on their own, I'm not sure the city ought to be the one coming in and dictating how they should run their operation. So that's my first proposed amendment.
So do you know what section that applies to?
Well, it's a new compromise that I'm trying to suggest to my colleagues might be fairer than what is currently being proposed.
Well, we do have to have a section, because if we're going to have a first reading of this tonight, we have to be rather precise about what changes we're making.
So maybe the city attorney can help me out here. Is there, I'm creating perhaps a new section.
It might.
What I could do is take a sense of the council,
that's
whether we
fine.
want to spend time on this issue. So, did you want to Councilmember Largasola, did you need a clarification of what's being proposed?
No, I was just, through the chair, I was just going to suggest if there was an amendment, I think it might go under the definition of multi-unit residence, and then that could be amendment. But the answer to your second question is, I regretfully won't be voting to support Councilmember Young's amendment.
Okay, and then let me ask another question of staff or Solano Public Health, is that, do other communities address condos? Okay, so this is not plowing new ground. This is something that's successful in other communities. Okay, and all right, Councilmember Campbell, before we...
Well, you know, he did bring up a point. What are you going to do with existing condominiums where someone bought it? You know, they assumed they had a certain set of bundle of rights, and you're kind of taking one away. You know, do you like ease it in, give people time to move out of the condo, for example, or do you try and just boom? You know, one day it's in, and that's the end of it. You know, I mean, I understand where Councilman Young is going with this. There is a question of, if you've been living someplace for 20 years and you smoke, much as I hate smoking, you know, you just wonder, you know, what are you going to do?
Right, so Councilmember, Vice Mayor Strawbridge?
I'm okay with the ordinance as written.
Okay, and so that is my position. So that's 3 that are not interested in the change.
All right, I'll move on. The issue of applying for that it applies to anything of 2 units or more, I think is pretty extreme. I would propose to raise that to 4 units or more, because I'm sure I'm not the only person in town who lives in a duplex and is an owner who rents out the other side, and now I would be subject to these same restrictions, even though I would consider myself an owner-occupant in a single-family house. Technically, it's a duplex. So I would like to propose raising 2 units to 4 units.
Okay, once again, clarifying, do we have a sense of what other communities have done? Is it majority 2 units, majority 4 units?
We can do whatever we want.
Almost all the ordinances passed so far, with the exception of just maybe 2 cities, has always been 2.
It's always been 2. Okay? Can I get a clarification from staff is, if you have an ADU, is that 2 units?
Sure is. We're counting it as a separate unit.
I'm waiting for staff response. No.
It's in the definitions of multi-unit. If you look at on page 209, gosh, I need my glasses. I-6,
All right.
it excludes that concept.
So again,
Okay.
again, I think this is just too intrusive to say that somebody in my situation, I don't smoke, but I may have a guest or a family member who comes over and wants to go out onto the back porch and have a cigarette. And now they are not allowed to do that on my own house, on my own property. That's a bridge too far for me.
Okay, I'll start to my right this time. Councilmember La Espada, do you support the change from 2 to 4?
No, just for 2 reasons, well, 3. 1, this is all about public health, but 2, these associations, whether you own or rent, live under conditions of all sorts of rules. These rules continue to change. So I don't think this is all that new that, we would bring a new set of rules to them. And then, 2 or 4, I mean, this is really about protecting a wall between a non-smoker and a smoker. So I'm not for changing the definition of multi-unit.
Okay, and Vice Mayor Strobridge?
I'm not willing to change either.
Okay, and Councilmember Campbell? Okay, so, and I agree with my colleagues. Next item?
The idea of, I understand that, again, smoking inside a attached unit, a multifamily unit, secondhand smoke travels. I will continue to argue that vaping residue, oxidized, or whatever we call it, vaporized molecules, don't travel the same way tobacco does. And so I would like to amend this to only apply to the smoking of tobacco products.
And what section is that?
Page 211 of your packet, under smoking definition.
Say that again?
Page 211 of your packet. The definition under U for smoking.
Okay, thanks. So, okay, I'll start to my left. Is there support for?
Well, for me, whether it's smoking or vaping, it's a group of chemicals in a mist in the air. And so I just don't see the difference.
Right.
Well, may I respond?
Yeah.
Certainly.
The difference is that we're talking about trying to protect adjacent units that are separated by walls. And that what one person does in the privacy of their own home with smoke and smoked tobacco does travel. I'm not convinced that that vaporized tobacco or vaporized cannabis travels. And that I think this is partly a attempt to do a backdoor ban on cannabis use in multifamily houses or multifamily units, when in fact 63% of Benicians voted to allow it. And I don't know that there is a strong reason that we should put them together. I get tobacco, smoking cannabis. Smoking cannabis has a smell. But vaping of either product, while it may not be healthy and while it may have nicotine in the case of e-tobacco, I don't think it's been shown that it has the ability to travel through walls and affect adjacent units. And we're now talking about taking away the right to do something that is a legal activity. I'm okay with doing it on the smoke part, but I think it's wrong and too intrusive for the city to say, not only can you not smoke, you cannot vape in the privacy of your own unit.
Councilmember Lagaspada, your light is on.
Oh, I'm sorry, are we ready to vote on that?
Okay, so there is much to learn about vaping. And a few years ago, when we banned e-cigarettes, there was a split vote on the council. And one of the council members said that, well, we just don't know enough, and it's going to help people quit smoking, and even the notion that youth would take up on the e-cigarette was dismissed as unnecessary. And you heard tonight the testimony of what we've learned about the effect of e-cigarettes. Because we know so little about the effects of vaping smoke, if you will, and that it travels as VOCs travel, I would not support changing the proposed ordinance. Vice Mayor Starbridge?
I think I was the one that brought that up when you were talking about e-cigarettes back several years ago, because at that time, we didn't seem to have enough information. I think we have a lot of information now. I can't support that. I feel like, again, vaping is smoke. You're talking about maybe not going through walls, but it can be possibly out on a deck or windows open. We get back to the same issues. So I can't support that.
And then Councilmember Lagaspada?
Likewise, I can't support it for 2 reasons. One, we heard some
Microphone, please.
Thank you, my apologies. I'm also a no on the amendment for 2 reasons. One, we heard some very compelling testimony today about the effects of the traveling smoke. And then likewise, it was also covered in a lot of the citations, in the back. So there is data, there is testimony that speaks to the impact of traveling vape smoke or whatever it is. While I'm on it, one thing I was looking for clarification, I think I heard a yes earlier, but I want to make sure we don't miss it. Does the definition of smoking as it pertains to multi-unit include cannabis? Because I don't see cannabis in this definition under subpoint U.
It says any plant product under subsection U. If you want to make it clearer, and I noticed this too, you could add the same last phrase of T to U, where it says includes, but it's not limited to, tobacco smoke, vapors from an electronic device, and cannabis smoke.
If that, through the chair,
That's what we did with city parks. We combined the banning of smoking that included tobacco and cannabis. So it would be an extension of what we began when we did this on the city parks.
to follow both your directions, I just want to make sure there won't be any misunderstanding or lack of clarity, 6 months from now when this rolls out.
Right. So I'm tracking, so we're adding that to be clear.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
That would be my
Thank you.
suggestion.
Any other items?
Yes, please. The idea that not only can you not partake of a legal product within your property, within your condo that you own, now we're saying you also cannot go out onto a deck or a porch or a balcony to do the same thing. Again, far too intrusive. The city does not really have a, I guess we have the right. We're going to find out. But I think it is discriminatory against, as the speaker said earlier, it's lower and moderate income people who live in apartments They can't afford to buy houses in Benicia. We're giving a pass to anybody who's fortunate enough to own a house in Benicia, but we're putting these rather draconian restrictions on people who don't have the ability to buy a house here, who live in a condo or an apartment, and it's simply not fair. Smokers, I'm not a smoker, but they have rights also. And we're just sort of trampling over those rights when we say that you're not even allowed to do a legal activity on not in your unit, but not even on your porch or your balcony or your deck. I think it's just too far. I would like to take that section out and allow it on those outdoor structures.
Councilmember Campbell?
Well, yeah, smokers do have rights, but then so do the people that are around smokers. They have rights too. That argument was the one that was used for decades until secondhand smoke data started coming in, in which case you don't smoke in a bubble, you don't smoke in a vacuum. The person next to you, if they don't smoke and the smoke wafts over to them, you have impacted them through no fault of their own.
And that includes outdoors.
It does. Yeah, it does. You know, that's why, you know, all these cities have bans on outdoor smoking around restaurants.
I recently had a neighbor, they were renters, nice folks. It's a unit that's been rented over the years, and there's an outdoor patio, and my house, I'm on the hill, and so I'm above that house. And when the woman would come out to smoke, I couldn't be outside, because the smoke came up to where I was. So I had to, my right to be in my yard was taken away, and so I would have to go inside the house. The difficulty with that strategy is during the summer, I'd have a window open for fresh air. I'd have to close the window if I didn't want to smell the smoke. So it does matter where one smokes, and it does impact those people. Vice Mayor Sturbridge?
I can't go along with it again, just for the same reasons I brought up before. I too have had the situation of being in a condo, living in a condo, and next door the people were partaking in not only smoking but cannabis, and it comes right in. They were outside on their deck, comes right into the screened in porch. So that's why we're initiating these smoke-free areas. So I can't go along with it.
And Councilmember Lagaspada?
I think City Councilman Campbell said it best, so.
Okay, anything else?
A couple more. Page 217, under other requirements and prohibitions. I do not understand the idea that, okay, so we're banning smoking, but it's illegal to have an ashtray. Okay, I guess there's a connection there. But the idea on C, 906.110C, no person shall dispose of used smoking waste within the boundaries of an area in which smoking is prohibited, including within any reasonable distance required by this chapter. So that means that if somebody's walking down First Street, somebody says, and they're smoking, and somebody says, oh, that's illegal, or a police officer says, you can't smoke here, and they say, okay, and they drop the cigarette, they put it out with their foot, they can't even pick it up and dispose of it? That's just silly.
Okay, well, let's see if we have some input from Ms. Barron. Can you help provide some insight as to what was envisioned with this?
Well, I must say, this was part of the Change Lab Solutions model, and so it's part of the model. We included it just because that's what was listed there. I don't truly know.
I'm guessing, I'm hypothesizing. It has to do with, we don't ban people smoking in their cars. As they go through a commercial district, we don't want them throwing their butts out in commercial districts. One area that we're considering regulating. So I'm guessing that's where this comes from, is one area that we're not regulating is people traveling in their vehicles. So I think this probably gets to...
That's not the way it reads.
What's that?
It's not the way it reads.
Well, it's one way it reads, but I think what you're saying also is someone's walking and tries to, put out their cigarette because they're in violation of the law, then, are we gonna cite them because they're also throwing it away in the garbage can?
Well, I would suggest we take that section out. What I don't want to do is pass an ordinance that is impossible to enforce.
Ms. Barron?
Yes, I believe our consultant, Serena Chen, may have shed some light on this topic.
Okay.
On this.
Yeah, I believe what that section means to say is that a lot of businesses have these cigarette butt disposals right outside their door. You have a trash receptacle and a thing on top where you can put your cigarette out. But what that does is signal to the person who smokes that that is an okay place to smoke. In fact, I've done interviews with people in downtown areas and say, what do you think about, I've actually asked people, where can I smoke? And they say right there by the ashtray, which is right by the front door of any building. So basically that section says that if you're going to have a receptacle to dispose of cigarette butts, they should not be within that 20-foot buffer, because what happens is that people who smoke are likely to congregate exactly right within that buffer zone.
So I think the specific paragraph, and I'll read it because it's really short, it's separate from the containers, the cigarette ash containers. It says, no person shall dispose of used smoking waste within the boundaries of an area in which smoking is prohibited, including within any reasonable distance required by this chapter. And essentially what it's saying is if you can't smoke and you're done with a cigarette and you cannot throw that cigarette away. You have to hold on to that cigarette until you get to a place where you can dispose of it legally. And I think that's the issue, is that, and do you know why it's written that way? I mean, I have a couple of theories, but...
I'd have to look that up, but it could be related to the whole toxic litter issue.
I'm kind of thinking that way, too. So, Councilmember Campbell?
Okay, I think you're going to win one here, because, it's covered under the litter laws anyway, so I can see throwing that one out myself.
Chief Upson?
I think maybe the solution to that, because Serena actually did make a valid point that a device specifically for putting out cigarettes located within the buffer we don't want, because it does signal that that's an okay place to smoke. I think I wouldn't disagree that the other language could be stricken.
Right, so, the receptacle is in a separate paragraph. So what's being asked, if we got rid of this paragraph C, right. So we have Vice Mayor Strawbridge?
Well, I guess maybe the city attorney, is it useful to have this? Is it important to keep this language in there?
In order to try to move this along, I think since none of us know what it's there for, and we're all hypothesizing, I think that answers your question.
That's good enough for me.
Okay, Councilmember Lagerspada?
I think we could cut it.
Okay, so you got one. So the motion to approve this ordinance would reflect that paragraph C of section 9.06.10 is deleted.
One last question, and then I'll be done. Have we talked to, for example, the owner of the Relic, or Luca, or any of the bars where smoking is prohibited, but their patrons who do smoke are now, trained to go outside, and now they're not going to be able to do that either. They're going to, if it's important to them to smoke, they'll just have to stop coming to the bar. Isn't that an accurate statement?
Councilmember Young, they were both, the individuals you mentioned were at the Downtown Business Alliance meeting. So those comments that I remarked, those were their comments and their concerns.
So they are concerned they're going to lose patronage
They did not say that in their comments. The ones that I read, those were directly from that meeting, the concerns they had. They were more concerned about hostile customers and how they were going to handle them, and they just didn't feel like they wanted to be the enforcers of it. They did not at that meeting. I was not at that meeting. That Mario was attending that meeting and took those notes, and that's the notes I got from
I think that's part of my concern, is they don't want to be the enforcers, the HOAs don't want to be the enforcers, they want the city to be the enforcers. They want to be able to call the cops and have a police officer go out and say, you're smoking, you can't smoke here. And,
So that's not how my experience was when we had to implement the state legislation. When I was planning director in Fairfax, that I had the same comments that I'm not going to have any customers. This is going to be a disaster. And so for the first 6 months, I worked very closely with them. Actually, we were designing outdoor places, but I worked really closely with them. And then meanwhile, they increased their customers by twofold. And so what the experience has been is that when you ban the smoking, many more people will come out and smoke and be, not smoke and be outside. And the police aren't called. And I never had any experience in the time that we were enforcing this with anger and hostility. There are legitimate concerns when you are used to doing business in a certain way for a certain period of time. But my experience that I had, and I'm telling you, Fairfax, it has a lot of bars. And I was really, really busy making sure that we could keep them calm and that business wouldn't be affected. And it wasn't affected, except that it got better. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen here. I recently, after the concert on Sunday at the Clock Tower, we went down to the pub, who was going to cater, but because of some mistake that was made by the applicants, they didn't get the right insurance policy in place, so we couldn't have we couldn't be having wine and beer at the Clock Tower. So we all promised we'd go down and be good patrons at the pub. And I left because of the smoking outside, which was drifting inside. And when I went outside in the so-called non-smoking part of it, it was like I was sitting in the smoking part. And so I'm sure there are many, many people like me that will go down there and hang out as long as there isn't smoking. And so I wouldn't support that. Councilmember Lagaspat, I'll start with you on the proposed, not to change the outdoor smoking. The request is to change the ban of outdoor smoking.
No, I'm good with approving the ordinance as is.
Thanks. Vice Mayor Strawbridge
I'm good with the way it's written. Thanks.
and Councilman okay, any more? So looking for a motion to approve the ordinance with a change as noted on deleting the section C of 9.06.110. And do we have any technical corrections to this?
Yes, the ones we spoke about earlier on page 211, changing smoking to include at the end of the sentence, and includes but is not limited to tobacco smoke, vapors from electric devices, and cannabis smoke, to make it consistent with the term smoke right above. To change the term tobacco product, as we did in the other ordinance, to state on V, tobacco product does not include a product that has been approved by the United States Food and Drug Administration for the sale as a tobacco cessation product or other therapeutic purposes where the product is marketed and sold solely for such an approved purpose. So those are the two clarifications, and then the deletion that Councilmember Young has support for.
Okay, question?
No, I was just going to make a motion.
So you know what? I've been at this for so long, I would like to make the motion.
Of
if
course,
you would
Mayor.
second it.
Of course, my apologies.
All right. Ms. Wolf, did you get the
You made the
correction?
motion, yes,
Yeah.
I have the motion.
Okay, great. Call roll, please.
Larkspot was the second.
Did we have a second on that?
Yes, you seconded it.
Oh, thank you. All right. Exciting.
Council members Campbell.
Yes.
Larkspot.
Yes.
Strawbridge.
Yes.
DeYoung,
No.
and Mayor Patterson.
Yes, and congratulations to all. Thank you so very much. That's great work. All right.